My fiancé's best man has decided it'd be funny to joke during his speech about me supposedly being passed around within our friend group. To make matters worse, I recently found out my fiancé secretly cancelled his health insurance to help cover wedding expenses. My fiancé, his best man, and a few of our groomsmen go way back. Most of us met between 6th and 7th grade, forming a tight-knit group that's remained close even as members have come and gone over the years. Lately, Jay, the best man and a guy I've known since middle school, has been making jokes whenever we're together. These started out as harmless, little remarks about how we used to date. I'll admit, back in 6th grade, I had a huge crush on Jay, and pretty much everyone knew it. I was unusually tall for my age, and he was one of the few boys as tall as me. But that was as far as it went. He was clear he wasn't interested. We grew past that awkward phase, and as adults, it became a running joke between us, never anything serious. Still, lately, Jay started telling people he dated me first when my fiancé and I are around, even though it's not true. While these comments are mostly light-hearted, they've become increasingly irritating, although I've been able to laugh them off or respond quickly to set things straight. Then, over the weekend, 2 of my fiancé's other groomsmen came by to hang out. The wedding came up, and they exchanged a worried look before saying there was something we should know. Apparently, Jay has been talking about including a story in his best man speech that implies I've been with several guys in our group. Out of respect, they didn't go into detail, but they made it clear the speech would cross a serious line, suggesting I'd slept with most of the guys in our group. They warned Jay it was inappropriate and told him he couldn't say anything like that in his speech, to which Jay responded that he already knew my maid of honor would be reviewing all speeches before the wedding. But he added, "What if I could," hinting he still might try to slip something in. I've only ever had harmless, innocent history with a couple of the guys in our friend group, and it was all way back in middle school. I mean, we're talking about stuff as innocent as my first movie date, where our parents had to drop us off and pick us up, and a 6-month relationship where the most we did was hug between classes. It's become a funny, nostalgic memory that's part of our shared history, nothing more. Over the years, other girls and guys in our small friend group have had similar experiences, mainly because we grew up in a small town where social circles overlap. Out of all the guys in our friend group, my fiancé is the only one I've dated seriously or had any real romantic connection with. We had an on-and-off relationship in high school, which ended when I left for college, but we stayed close friends and eventually reconnected in 2019. We started dating again in 2021, and by 2023, we were engaged. He's the only one I've ever been intimate with, making Jay's behavior even more bizarre and unsettling. Through high school, Jay and I stayed close, especially after my fiancé got into a toxic relationship that put some distance between them. Jay would often come to me for advice, whether it was about school, girls, or life in general. He was always our biggest supporter, even taking some credit and saying, "I told you so," when my fiancé and I got back together. So now, I'm not sure how to handle this. I could write an entire post about how frustrated, confused, and uncomfortable I feel. I do plan to discuss all of this with my fiancé in more depth after I take some time to think it over. My fiancé and the groomsmen have acknowledged that Jay's framing of things is wrong, but they seem to brush it off more easily than I can. I feel like I can't just let it go, and I'm not sure what steps to take next. For some additional context, 1. Our wedding isn't until the end of next summer, so most of the talk about speeches has been hypothetical. A few people, including Jay, have asked to give a toast, and we've posted a loose timeline and saved the dates on our website and invitations. 2. My fiancé and Jay have been best friends since kindergarten. They were neighbors, and my fiancé's family pretty much raised him alongside my fiancé. 3. Jay has only ever expressed platonic feelings for me. Even when we were both single, he's never acted romantically or inappropriately with me since that early crush I had on him in middle school. Update 1. April 3, 2024. I'm grateful to those who shared honest perspectives about how concerning this situation is. When I first posted, I was still processing my emotions and was probably too close to the situation to see it clearly. This has left me feeling paralyzed about what to do, both in the short term and the long term. Since posting, I've talked in more depth with my fiancé and one of the groomsmen, as well as confiding in my maid of honor for an outside perspective. Through these conversations and reflecting on comments from the original post, I've noticed a few key details that seem significant. Jay has always had a bit of a superiority complex, something that has become more noticeable over the years. He's the kind of guy who seems to feel he's the standout among his friends, whether because of his education, career, or his luck with women. He can also be somewhat self-centered, often overlooking how his actions might affect others as long as they bolster his own ego. It's clear this isn't really about me, but more about my fiancé's next steps in life. It feels like Jay is trying to pull my fiancé down a notch, either because he feels left behind or resents my fiancé for reaching this milestone first. Jay's attitude toward women has also shifted in recent years. He's become more openly disrespectful, and he's made comments that seem to reveal a belief that women are somehow inferior. It's unsettling to see this side of someone who used to be a supportive friend. I've had more recent conflicts with Jay around his views, which have started to drift into troubling territory. After speaking with one of the groomsmen, I learned the wedding talk started out innocently enough. Jay seemed genuinely excited about making the day special for us. But then, as they brainstormed speech ideas, Jay brought up some jokes aimed at poking fun at my fiancé and gradually suggested more inappropriate ideas. This included implying I'd been passed around our friend group as a joke to suggest our group's closeness. The other groomsmen immediately told him that wasn't appropriate, reminding him of the potential harm his comments could cause. Still, they saw it as a one-time lapse in judgment from Jay, who seemed to be caught up in his own ego. My fiancé and I are the first in our group to have a full wedding with a ceremony and reception. It's only since we got engaged about a year ago, and especially after Jay's breakup with his longtime girlfriend, that his jokes have escalated. Jay has never said anything like this when we're alone or with only my fiancé, only in group settings, and usually when others outside our close circle are present. So, what's next? In my initial reaction, I downplayed my feelings to keep the peace. I don't blame my fiancé for not reacting strongly, especially since I didn't at the time. It's also worth mentioning that Jay isn't a regular part of our daily lives. We live in different states, and he only visits when work brings him to our area. Much of his recent personality changes seem to have happened in these last few years away from us. Years of friendship aside, I realized this wasn't an excuse for how we failed to hold Jay accountable. But I felt it was important context. This wasn't behavior we saw and ignored every day, it was something that gradually revealed itself, especially since we only see him around 4 times a year. When I brought this up, my fiancé was very open to talking about it and even suggested having a conversation with Jay. However, he admitted he didn't see it as anything more than Jay just being Jay, thinking it was all talk. Up until that point, we had only focused on how Jay's behavior had been escalating and how uncomfortable I was starting to feel. My fiancé's lack of accountability regarding Jay's actions stung a bit, but then I remembered a comment that asked if I still considered Jay a friend because I genuinely wanted to or because it was just what I'd always done. That thought led us into a longer, more meaningful conversation. I told my fiancé that while I respected his long history with Jay, I personally didn't want to be friends with him anymore after this. I also pointed out that while Jay's remarks were explicitly targeting me, questioning my integrity and character, every instance seemed to be used as a tool to undermine my fiancé's accomplishments, as if getting married somehow made him less than. I told my fiancé that I respected whatever decision he chose regarding his relationship with Jay, but to me, Jay's actions showed a blatant lack of respect for our friendship. I didn't want to dictate how my fiancé should handle his relationship with Jay, but I could see that my words were resonating with him, and he was beginning to come to his own conclusions. As the conversation went on, my fiancé recognized that if the roles were reversed, if one of my bridesmaids were badmouthing him, he would absolutely want me to reevaluate that friendship. He asked for a few days to process everything and think about what he wanted to say to Jay. He also asked if he could mention that I no longer wanted to be friends with Jay, and I told him that would be okay. I made it clear that if Jay wanted to talk with me after their conversation, it would need to be the three of us, not just a one-on-one. Right now, I'm still thinking about what to do with the wedding speeches and toasts. My fiancé and I agreed we might not let Jay give a speech at all. We discussed other options, like having another groomsman speak or possibly canceling the speeches entirely. If Jay does give a toast, we plan to ask the DJ to cut the mic if he crosses any lines. There's still plenty of time for things to develop before the wedding, and I'm keeping an open mind for any new insights or advice. Reflecting back, I want to thank those who helped me see how serious this situation really was. Your honest advice made me look at things with more clarity and helped me process everything that had happened. When I first shared this, I was still in shock and just beginning to come to terms with what was unfolding. Your comments gave me the nudge I needed to really face what was happening and my true feelings about it. As I read through the comments, a few common questions came up, like how my fiancé and I could stay friends with someone like Jay for so long and be okay with his behavior. Others asked why Jay felt comfortable enough to make such offensive remarks in the first place, or why my fiancé needed time to decide about cutting him off. Some even wondered why he was still part of the wedding at all. I get where they're coming from. It seems strange that my fiancé would hesitate to stand up for me or that he would let Jay be involved in something as important as our wedding if he has any respect for me as his fiancé and future wife. One commenter really summed it up by saying that Jay's misogyny and my fiancé's hesitation to cut him out both seemed like red flags. Looking back, I'd say that much of Jay's behavior developed gradually and wasn't as obvious when we were younger. He always had a superiority complex, but back then, it came off as immaturity rather than disrespect. After high school, Jay and I both moved away, so we only see him a few times a year now, and I genuinely believe he saw me as little more than a way to take jabs at my fiancé. The fact that my fiancé has no brothers makes Jay's role in his life more like a brother than just a friend. And since Jay has no immediate family, my fiancé has probably felt responsible for filling that space for him. My fiancé is one of the kindest, most peaceful people I know, and while he usually avoids conflict, he's always stood up for what matters. I think he just didn't realize how much had been at his expense until we talked about it. Our wedding is still more than a year away, so we have time to work through this. Since neither of us has confronted Jay yet, it felt premature to make any hard decisions about cutting him from the wedding. The whole situation is fresh, and I'm giving myself a bit of grace to absorb everything before making any final calls. I hit my breaking point just 2 weeks ago. Between everything happening with his best man and a series of other challenges we'd been facing, I kept trying to keep us afloat. Over the past 6 months, I'd been actively working on our relationship, seeking therapy to address my own anxieties and feelings of a lack of support. I wanted us to be in a stronger place, something I felt we really needed before fully committing to each other. But things took an unexpected and startling turn when, after a recent health scare requiring a trip to the emergency room, my fiancé admitted he had secretly cancelled his health insurance back in January. His reason? He thought the wedding was costing too much and wanted to save the $150 a month. This confession left me reeling. I've done a small bit of accounting in the past, and I've meticulously budgeted our wedding down to every last dollar, taking into account inflation and any other potential costs. All in all, it comes out to around $22,000, with my parents generously contributing $14,000 to help us. I've also covered extra expenses myself, including my dress, our wedding bands, and a portion of the vendors. The money was managed carefully, and there was absolutely no need to cancel his insurance for extra savings. Yet, despite that decision, I haven't seen any of that supposed saved money contribute to wedding expenses anyway. So, to help ease the financial burden he felt, I took it upon myself to get a part-time job on top of my full-time one, which already has me working long hours and traveling frequently. My full-time job alone earns around $70,000 annually, making me the higher earner between us, but I pushed myself further for him. I started reviewing blogs, essays, and resumes in my spare time. Most days, I'd get home 3 hours after him, hop straight onto my laptop for a couple of hours to meet my quota, and then finally get some time with him. But my efforts were met with cold shoulders, frustration, and accusations that I wasn't prioritizing our relationship. For months, I tried to talk about his frustrations, only to be met with circular arguments that went nowhere. And then, 2 weeks ago, during Hurricane Helen, things came to a head. My job had me fly out early to Atlanta to avoid the storm. With my afternoon flight suddenly moved to 5 a.m. the next day, I rushed home to finish packing and prepare for the trip. We'd planned to try out a new pizza place that night, and my fiancé offered to order a hot honey, jalapeno, and pineapple pizza. Normally, I'd be open to trying something new, but given my travel stress and early start, I wasn't up for it. I don't like jalapenos, and I can't stand pineapple on pizza. I asked if we could try it when I returned instead, calmly explaining my reasoning. His response? A scoff and a sarcastic, "What, just cheese then?" I tried to explain again, but he walked out. No food was ordered. When I asked if he'd considered another option, I got a flat no. With time running out, I broke down and told him to just order the hot honey pizza, feeling defeated. He accused me of making him feel like he was forcing me, but eventually, the pizza was ordered. Everything seemed fine on the surface, but as I drove to the airport hotel, I cried the entire way. The stress and emotional weight finally broke me. Over the next 2 days, I cried through the storm in Atlanta, completely overwhelmed. I called my fiancé, pouring out every frustration, only for him to respond with ultimatums. He wanted to know, in no uncertain terms, if we were still getting married next summer, and he's given me until the end of October to decide. I want to believe love can get us through this, but right now, I'm not sure. He's refused counseling, despite my pleading. I've tried to explore every possible path to work on things together, but each conversation has left me second-guessing if we can make it work. My therapist and I are talking through this, but I wonder just how much more I can handle.